everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And it is time for an hour of me talking to you about the stuff that I love and the stuff that makes me enthusiastic, be it movies, TV shows, books, science fiction, technology, or faith. All that coming up in this episode of The Break. Brought to you, as always, by my wonderful community of patrons. And if you want to join that community in their support for my mission to reach out to people from all over the world, then take a look at patreon.com/Father Roderick.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
This week, we're still in the aftermath of the horrible earthquakes that happened in Syria and in Turkey. And we've been witnessing almost on a daily basis in the news all the efforts from rescue crews from all over the world to try to find survivors. And it's stunning to see that they are still retrieving people from the rubble. And it's been more than a week now. It's basically the people that are now saved. I guess it's almost miraculous. Although I always warn people to attribute something to God's intervention, because then, of course, immediately the second question that people will ask is, well, if God enables this miracle, couldn't he have prevented the entire earthquake from happening? But I'm more thinking of the miracle in a metaphorical sense of the word, the resilience of some of the people that have been rescued and how they kept each other alive. I read a story yesterday of two brothers, I think, who were able to survive by drinking their own urine. It's not a pretty story, and apparently they were able to find protein powder. So maybe they were trapped, I don't know, in a gym or anyhow, but that's how they survived, by eating protein powder for 10 days. And then they were liberated. It's incredible. And then, of course, the other miracle is just the incredible talent of the rescue workers and the people that sometimes were working like 2-3 days without sleeping just to save whoever they could still find. Not just human victims of the earthquakes, but also animals. There were some endearing stories of dogs and cats that were rescued. And of course, that also pulls in our heartstrings in a certain way. So, but it's no matter. I mean, we shouldn't compare like, oh, but people are more important than animals. If, as I said last week, if you want to see God at work, look at the helpers, look at those rescue workers. And of course, this is only the beginning. There are more than 45,000 victims, and people have lost everything they had. So building up their lives again. Imagine you had a store, a bakery, a job. Your entire the place where you worked collapsed. There are hundreds of thousands of people that were affected by these earthquakes. And it's heartwarming to see that from all over the world, help is pouring in. And I just hope that people won't forget after a couple of days. This is usually how the news tends to work. It's like all the spotlights on one place in the world, and then something else happens, even if it's not as important, something in local politics, and everybody seems to forget what just happened a couple of days ago. And I think especially for Christians, it's important to have a long-term memory and to not forget about people that continue to suffer from events that may have been forgotten in the media, may have been forgotten in the general conscience, general awareness. But we should not give up on people just because they're not newsworthy anymore. News is only focusing on literally on what is new and what is different, and oftentimes we get numb. The other thing I wanted to mention here in the news item is something that really is so shocking to see, that since the beginning of this New Year, there have been mass shootings almost on a daily basis in the United States. I mean, it was already horrible for years, but it seems it continues to accelerate, and it's every time it's the same story. And people get numb. Even the news media, even politicians, they get numb. They're like, oh well, what are you going to do? Yeah, what are you going to do? And everybody looks at each other and it's, well, we have to report on this, but it doesn't even get to the front page of our websites anymore or newspapers anymore. But it's so dramatic what's happening, and it's not just a numbing of our consciousness, the numbing of our minds. Why am I trying to complicate things? But also there, we tend to forget that every mass shooting is hurting thousands of people, because the victims all have brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, children. They have relatives, people that live in their neighborhoods. And so the traumatic impact of violence on a daily basis in the United States. Plus, don't forget the trauma that you get from just empathizing. See this every day. It does something to you too. Makes you feel insecure or maybe desperate. And what do you do in certain situations like that? I would say never normalize pain and suffering. If there's one thing we have to keep in mind, next Wednesday, we start Lent. And if there's one thing that Catholics and Christians do during Lent is to never forget what happened 2,000 years ago. And every year we tell that same story of Christ's suffering, because that particular moment in history was, in a way, you could say, enveloping every other story of suffering in the world. And the reason that we have ritualized this, the commemoration of Christ's suffering and of his sacrifice, is because Jesus is present with all these other people that suffer up until today. And if we keep remembering how much he suffered, hopefully that will also keep us sensitive to the ways in which Christ is suffering in the lives of all these other victims of violence or natural disasters. So that's one thing. Never trivialize violence. Never despair also, like, well, what are you going to do? That kind of like, what are you going to do mentality, that will guarantee that nothing will change. So how do you change? Well, of course, there's the political side of this. This has to be like a communal will, but we also know how much that has proven to be a almost non-moving thing. We've heard these stories for decades now. And it seems that nothing is changing. But there is one thing you can change, and that is to change yourself, your own attitude towards this. Be the first to not have arms, to not justify this senseless violence by saying, well, but we need to defend the right to bear arms. I know this is a very controversial topic in the United States, but take it from a country where we rarely ever have stuff like that happening. And it's just because nobody owns guns except for criminals, and we try to prevent them from having guns. But aside from the political debate and the whole question of whether or not you think this should be justified or not, ask yourself: do I need to own weapons? Why am I afraid? And am I not perpetuating this situation by condoning this whole culture? It's all about the society changes when we change. And we change not because someone else is changing and then I'm thinking, well, okay, it's because that person changes that I have to change. No, it starts with you. Make your own commitment for peace. Pray for peace. Pray that God changes your heart. And then, of course, you may be skeptical that things will ever change in society. But if you don't change, you can be guaranteed that nothing will change. So anyway, that's that's my call to action. And of course, we have to pray. We have to think about these victims. But thoughts and prayers are worthless if they're not accompanied by a change of heart and thereby a change of our own choices and our own actions. So during this time of Lent, think of the victims. Pray for them. Pray for peace in your country. Pray for peace in your own neighborhood. Pray for peace in your own heart. And maybe things will start to change. It all change starts small.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You need a movie education. You need a movication. I'm gonna give it to you.
Let's talk about Star Trek Picard. I have just wrapped up watching the second season of Star Trek Picard. And I have to say I had mixed feelings about it. I liked some of the themes that they tackled, but the middle of the season was very weak, and it just felt like the story was pretty thin and it was spread out over way too many episodes. But the thing that irked me the most about Picard so far was that it didn't feel like Star Trek, because there was no Star Trekking. There was this spaceship in this second season. I'm not going to go into spoilers, and it was just sitting there on the planet Earth, and they didn't fly with it, or barely, and there was no exploration. And the second thing was that it was the plot was emphasizing like trauma especially in the life of Picard himself, but it became so kind of almost pretentious, and it felt at both too serious and also way too superficial. And what was, I think, sorely lacking was humor. Was kind of this sparkle, this sense of adventure. And so I was a bit skeptical about the third season of Picard, because I heard that they were going to bring back a lot of the cast members of the original Next Generation television series. And that almost felt like, well, we're desperate, We know that this series didn't really do what we hoped it would do. It didn't have the impact on the fans. People, I think most Star Trek fans actually like Strange New Worlds a lot better than Discovery and Picard. Even Lower Decks is sometimes more highly rated than Picard. So let's just bring back the nostalgia factor, and that will hopefully help us to get to the end of this last season. So I was like, I hope it's not too bad. But judging from the first two seasons, I did not trust the writers. How wrong was I? This third season, I've only seen the first episode. But that first episode I would rank it higher than all my rankings for the previous two seasons added up. This was excellent. It had everything I want in Star Trek. It had, first of all, great chemistry between the actors. In the first two seasons of Picard, I felt like they're introducing all these new characters, and they don't work together. It all feels a bit awkward, contrived. The only character that I felt worked really well from the past was the Borg Queen. The actress passed last week, 2 weeks ago, unfortunately, at a very young age. She did a terrific job in bringing back kind of the threat of this Borg Queen that I think was one of the best things of Star Trek Generations, the movie. But, was it Generations with the Borg? Or one of the other movies. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But like a couple of the new characters, they weren't bad, but there was no ensemble, and the way in which they wrote the series, they constantly would split up, and then you would have two people here and two people there, and then let's make Seven of Nine like bisexual, let her have this other relationship with this new character, which for me all felt contrived, and they're trying too hard to make it modern. But what they forgot was it lacked cohesion, it lacked humor, and most of all, chemistry. Well, the chemistry was right there from the first minute of this new season. The first thing I noticed was that they got rid of this very long introduction with all the CGI, like glass splinters in the air, which just went on forever and ever. I'm always looking for, like, okay, how do I skip this? How do I skip this? Oh, bloody bleep. I missed the moment where I could press that icon to skip this. Now I have to sit and watch this whole intro. They got rid of that. It's fast, and it's in space. Oh my gosh. Like the entire premise of this third season is someone is in trouble in space. Let's get a spaceship. Let's go and help that person. I was like, that is what Star Trek is supposed to be. Not all these stories about childhood trauma on planet Earth, because that's so cheap to film. And that was another thing that struck me is, at least for this first episode, they really spent money. This was finally something that didn't feel like they were cutting corners cost-wise. We had even the sets that they built. They are walking through corridors. There are sliding doors, just like on the old Star Trek. There are special effects that are. And we had those in Discovery, but not in Picard for some strange reason. And it almost felt like Picard, despite it being about one of the most popular Star Trek characters in the history of Star Trek, they did what Lucasfilm did wrong with Obi-Wan Kenobi. When they brought back Ewan McGregor, they bring back one of their biggest stars, their most loved characters of the entire Star Wars universe. And then they cut all the corners they could cut to film it as cheaply as possible with just a few extras and the same. It felt so small. And that I had the same feeling with Picard. Well, this third season shows that there is another way. And you can make it look big budget, just maybe by pouring in a little bit more of a big budget. And it felt so good. This, quality-wise, felt like a movie. Maybe even one of the best Next Generation movies. Because, let's be honest, not all Next Generation movies were a success, especially the later ones. Oh my gosh, the one with the clone Picard. Oh, the Nemesis. That is just one of the worst Star Trek stories I've ever seen. Everything was bad about that movie. Well, maybe not everything, but a lot of it was bad. And this was like, oh gosh, if only we could have had this from the beginning. Make it so. The detail that they put in the backgrounds and the whole, like, for instance, the computer screens. I love the LCARS interfaces that you see in the Next Generation, it's very iconic, the curves and then the pastel colors on all the computer terminals. Well, now, of course, they can use big monitors to do that live on stage. In the past, it was all like printed on foil, and none of those. They did have a few lights behind it to simulate computer, but now they can do full-fledged moving computer graphics, and it looked glorious. And they updated the LCARS UI because, of course, in the Star Trek timeline, time has passed between the Next Generation time and those big bulky spaceships they had at the time. They have an inside joke, and then the time frame of Picard, but they still created like an evolution of the design language that we first saw in the Next Generation. And it was so much better than what they did in the first two seasons, where they have all the holographic VR stuff, which I felt like, okay, they probably had very high expectations of where Meta was going to bring VR, but it's almost as if they totally forgot about that technology, and now they're back to regular screens, and it somehow feels much more real. Because you know that when you see all those moving holograms, it's fake. It's computer graphics. These actors are just pointing at empty space, basically. But with these screens, they're actually pressing buttons on screens and, well, not buttons, virtual buttons on screens, and things move. It felt grounded. It felt real. It was just amazing. The last thing I'm going to say about this is how awesome some of the recurring characters are. They brought back Riker in the first season, right? Just very briefly. It was almost a cameo. But a lot of the actors, the original actors, are now back in the series for the entire duration of the season, and especially Picard and Riker are fantastic in this first episode. It's instant chemistry. It's as if Picard cannot really truly be Picard without Riker to bounce off of. And now that Riker is there, all of a sudden it works. And then when they first introduced Riker, of course he's married to Deanna Troi, and so they played up that, and then there was their son or child. I forgot. I totally forgot about the whole plot of season 1. But anyway, for some reason, for me, Riker and Troi never really was very convincing. That never worked for me, that relationship in Star Trek. But Picard and Riker, oh my gosh, yes. And here, what I love is that they're both older and a bit more. They have this self-deprecating humor that is so funny. And finally, Picard can just be Picard. And he doesn't have to be constantly this traumatized person who is struggling with all sorts of new things. And oh man, that was so depressing to see Picard in the first 2 seasons basically being someone where, like, all the character choices that they made in the writing felt like the opposite of what Picard was in The Next Generation. And I was like, how can they do that to that character? It doesn't feel like the Jean-Luc that everybody loved and was one of the best captains in Star Trek history. And I couldn't put my finger on it. Well, what is different now? And now I know. It was just that what made Picard was all the other characters. And that's one of the things I think they understood in season 2 when they brought back Q. Now, Q and Picard also, it's that instant spark. Unfortunately, Q was almost not present in the second season. He was a main important plot character, but we barely got to see him. Whereas Delancey and Sir Patrick Stewart have fantastic chemistry on screen. They didn't use it. Instead, they were focusing on all these secondary characters that I personally didn't care about that much. And they're all, well, they're not. Some of them are now gone. The Borg Queen is gone, and then the other dude with the beard is gone. I even don't remember his name. And so, yeah. What was it? Was it the Vulcan, the young kid who was good at fighting? Also, such a random character that was so not well, maybe it could have been Star Trek if it was written right, but it just didn't work. Like half of the cast of the last 2 seasons didn't work, and here it's like instant. Like this is the Star Trek that I love so much, and it's back. And I'm so glad that this is the last season. So hopefully they cannot mess this up after this season anymore, because there's not going to be another season. So goodness gracious. I am happy. And at the same time, I'm also a little bit like, couldn't you have done that 2 seasons ago? Instead of giving us that mediocre stuff that you've been selling under the name of Picard for 2 seasons? Anyway. Let's forget about the past. Let's focus on this season. I love it so far. And, one final thing. The music is outstanding. It's all orchestral music. Again, they didn't cut costs here. It's fantastic too. Even during the end sequence, you hear, like, I think the Next Generation theme, and probably also the Voyager theme, I'm not sure. But there are like 2 iconic themes, And the entire soundtrack of the first episode is fantastic. And I so hope this is going to be a huge success so that they understand what the fans really want. And hopefully that will guide them in future decisions as to where to take this franchise, because it's been a bit hit and miss. Same thing for Star Wars. I like The Bad Batch, but I don't love it. There were some excellent episodes. Last week was okay-ish. Like, it seems to be the ups and downs of that series are too high and the lows are too low. I hope The Mandalorian is going to be good. And then I really hope that in April, we're going to get finally an announcement of a movie or movies. They've been sitting on their hands for far too long. Come on. We need Star Wars back in theaters. I love Star Wars television, but you cannot do what you can do in a movie. And I think that Disney, especially with all the changes that are happening now and the financial problems that they seem to have, I think they've just been afraid to go to launch themselves into another theatrical adventure. But I would say just go for it. Try it out. Dare. Trust in good writing and listen to the fans and just go for it. Because just as with Picard season 3, it's almost like this could have been a movie. I think sometimes franchises need something to rally up all the fans so that everybody is excited again. And Star Wars is at that point. I mean, I love what they've been doing over the past 3 years, but we need a tentpole thing in Star Wars. And it needs to be exciting and it needs to be new. Don't always recycle the same old. Dare to bring us something that surprises us all. It should be possible. Come on, it's Star Wars. Anyway, I'm going to stop now.
Catholics rock!
It's time for a quick visit to the Peculiar Bunch because, of course, next week is the beginning of Lent, so we need to talk about it.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
And Lent, of course, is 40 days of preparation, more or less 40 days for Holy Week and then Easter.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
And so it's always good to kind of work our way through all these different elements of the Lenten period, so that maybe together we can figure out ways and make that a fruitful time. Now, you may remember me saying, 2 weeks ago, that I felt like the Lent is coming so early this year and I wasn't ready for it. And can't we just push Lent more to like the end of springtime or maybe even in the summertime? Because the world is so gloomy and dark and it's still cold outside and rainy. And then the Catholic Church is like, okay, let's make you even more depressed by starting this time of penance. And I have to say that I'm a little bit more open to the idea of Lent. This sounds so ridiculous. It's some, I don't know. There is wisdom in the liturgical year, and of course, it's not a problem as such if sometimes the church is challenging people, including me. You know, if we are not challenged by our faith, then we're not growing. So it's funny that even though 2 weeks ago I was like, okay, I wouldn't be against postponing Lent this year just to give us like some extra. Can't we just have a second Christmas, like somewhere in February? We'll just do one last Christmas celebration. I don't know, just bring back the happiness and the little lights and the hot chocolate, and then we can start thinking of Lent when nature is a little bit more benevolent towards us. You know. Balance it out a little bit, but this at this time of the year, at this time of the month, I think I'm ready for it. I think we can start Lent, and And of course, it may also be linked to my own personal perception of Lent and the way I was brought up in this tradition, which of course differs also from country to country and even from family to family. When you say Lent, you know what the first thing is that I think of? This may surprise you. I think of carrots. I'm not kidding you. You say Lent, I think carrots. Why? Is because my mom often made on Fridays, where you're not supposed to eat meat, she felt that it was a good idea to make cooked carrots mashed with potatoes. So we would have, I don't know if there's a carrot mash or how do you call that? I don't know. It's a thing that it looks like this cone of lava. And then in the middle there would be this little lake, and my mom would pour gravy inside that lake. And then we would have fish sticks on the side because fish was expensive and fish sticks were affordable. And of course, what good is it to not eat meat and then to spend a fortune on expensive fish? So we got fish sticks, super low budget fish. And they were just sitting there. So I still see my plate, and it's got this big orange mountain that almost like this horrible like volcano of like mashed cooked potato. I don't like carrots. I don't like potatoes, especially not cooked. I mean, fried maybe, although you cannot fry carrots, unfortunately. I will get to carrots, basically. I found a solution for my carrot problem. But we'll talk about that in the food segment, kitchen segment. But anyway, you got that volcano of orange goo with a little lake of heated up gravy. And then around and on the sides would be these like planks of fried fish that didn't have any taste, and that was it. Like in my mind, it was every Friday. I'm sure that wasn't the case, but that's what I remembered, and so I started to associate Lent first of all with that orange goo that I abhorred, and I don't like it at all. I really don't like it, and then. This whole idea that Lent was all about punishment. So it was all about the stuff that you were not allowed to do. Like you were not allowed on the weekend before Lent, before Ash Wednesday. Sometimes we would go and stay with our grandparents who lived in the south of the country, and they have this carnival tradition where it's like this big feast and everybody is dressed up and it's like super exuberant and colorful and cheerful and music is fantastic. And then what I liked the most as a kid was that you would have these processions with big floats, I think you call them in English. And then there would be these carnival princes, and they would throw candy into the public. They would just have tons and tons of candy, and we would go and grab all the candy, and we would put it in a container, only to hear on Ash Wednesday, okay, you're not going to eat the candy. And not like because it's not good for your teeth or you get belly ache if you eat too much candy. No, it was like for 40 days, you have this box full of fantastic candy that you crawled on the ground to grab it and to get the best ones, and you know how they tasted because for a few days you had the opportunity to sample a bit of that candy. So I had like a kilo of candy sitting in that box, and we couldn't touch it for 40 days. And that felt so, and of course it was all educational because it's good to deny yourself stuff. It was surrounded with this religious narrative, offer it up, blah blah blah. And as a child, I was just like I resented the church for imposing 40 days of punishment, and I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I punished? Like, I didn't crucify Jesus. Can I have candy, please? No, it's Lent. So anyway, it was like we couldn't eat the candy. And then we also had the orange goo on Fridays, and in church also. I was an altar boy, and always in Lent the liturgy became super like sober all of a sudden, and we wouldn't have nice songs anymore, and it would all the liturgical tradition, Dutch tradition is musically is horrible. A lot of the songs that we sing in church are terrible. I don't like them at all. And as a child, I already hated songs, and then we're still singing them for some reason. But anyway, we didn't have that much renewal in the Catholic Church musically. So, but all the songs would always be about suffering and about penance and about, and it would all be in minor key. And as a child, I was so sensitive to all these like, how can I say that they all triggered depression in a certain way. And I was never successful in getting rid of that association, and it's in my mind, and your mileage may vary, but Lent was always like, oh, here we go again. Why does this have to be 40 days? Come on. And then every year, as I grew older, of course, I was trying to kind of rethink this, and maybe we can reframe this, and it's not supposed to be just all gloom and doom. It's a period of growth, etc. But how do you get rid of these early childhood memories of Lent basically being terrible? And it was always raining. The weather outside was terrible. So on Sundays, you would have like a mass, no frankincense. I was an altar boy. I loved frankincense. I loved all the pomp and circumstance. And then during Lent, it was so boring. It was so you start Sunday with like a mass with boring songs and nothing to do and no frankincense and then the rest of the day it would rain and no candy and oh man. So this is one big promotional advertisement for the joys of Lent. And I know, of course, Lent is a time of penance, and it is a time to focus on on suffering and on the sacrifice of Christ. But I feel that for Lent to work, I think we should focus on the fruits of Lent. Penance is not a goal in itself, and I think a lot of the way in which we talk about Lent, especially on social media and Ash Wednesday, it's all about look at me being so pious and devoted. Here's what I give up for Lent. For years, we've had these discussions on Twitter and Facebook, like, here's what I give up for Lent. In my podcast, I would say, well, this is what I'm giving up this year for Lent. I'm going to put all my social media devices on grayscale, extra punishment, because I'm not supposed to like social media. It's evil. So I'm just put it on grayscale. And every time I pick up my phone, I'm looking at this grayscale, and it's not as enticing anymore. And I'm thinking, yeah, but what's the point of that? I mean, what's the point if it doesn't have fruits? What is the fruit of that? If it's only like, oh, I want to feel more miserable. What can I do to feel more miserable? What can I offer up so I feel a bit like Jesus, like halfway through the way of the cross? Or I don't think that Lent should be about that. If you go back to Jesus, it was always, of course, the foundation of what we do in the liturgy. Lent, of course, and the reason that it's 40 days is because Jesus went to the desert for 40 days. And he didn't eat and he didn't drink. And he went there to pray. But the fact that he did not eat and did not drink and that he went to the desert had one very specific goal, and that was to be completely 100% occupied with his relationship with his Father. He was able to give up all that stuff because it didn't even enter his mind. He was talking to his Father, and that's a positive relationship. He was there to pray. He was there to experience a little bit of that relationship that he had before he came on earth. from all eternity on to be in this constant, like, one-on-one with his Father and have this constant relationship. And so all the rest was unimportant. But Jesus never boasted, like, hey, guess what I gave up for Lent? I gave up food. I gave up multiplying bread. I gave up even multiplying fish. I love fish. On Fridays, usually I eat fish. I even gave that up for 40 days. I gave up on wine, even though I can change water into wine. I gave it up, offer it up. Look at me. I'm so pious. Hey, by the way, I'm actually going to make a social media post while I'm at it. Like, hey, Jesus here. Here's what I give up for Lent. And, oh, by the way, I'll include a selfie of my cross on my forehead because, so just to inspire you, I just want you to know that I am serious about Lent. I'm serious about Ash Wednesday, so I'm just going to add an extra. They didn't have selfies at the time, but I'll just hire an icon painter and we'll post that on the on the bulletin boards next to the synagogue. So no, Jesus is actually very, very clear about this. When you fast, don't go tell everybody that you do. Go wash your face, just wash your face also means don't post selfies with that, like, look at me, I'm celebrating Ash Wednesday. Just to remind you, I don't do this for because we always find like reasons to do this. And I've done it. Like, I'm not just pointing at you, I'm pointing at myself as well. Because I was like, okay, well, the world needs to know that there are still Christians around that celebrate Ash Wednesday, and maybe that will create a meme or whatever. People will get motivated to also go to Ash Wednesday celebrations, and maybe if everybody posts selfies, it becomes normalized again, blah, 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 blah. But let's be honest. In the Bible, in the gospel, Jesus says, don't do that. Don't do that. If you pray, don't post about that. Like this Lent, I'm going to pray 1 hour per day, and I'm also going to read, I'm going to do Bible reading for 30 minutes per day. Let me post that on Instagram. Hashtag giving it up for Lent or something like that. But Jesus says, if you pray, close the doors. Don't let anyone know that you're praying. Because as long as you are in your mind thinking of like, oh, I need to communicate this, you're not actually praying. You're communicating what you're doing, but you're not focused on God. I think that's what Jesus wants to show when he's in the desert, is like nothing else matters anymore. Probably if they would come up to him and said, hey, you haven't eaten for a week, he'd say, well, I had no idea. I was praying. So don't spend effort in telling other people what you're going to do for Lent. Maybe if you want to give up one thing this Lenten period, is give up on telling people what you're going to do for Lent, what you're going to give up. Do it in secret. Your Father knows it. Tell it to God. That is what Lent is all about. And then don't show how virtuous you are by posting on social media your forehead on Ash Wednesday or whatever, but show the poor that you are serious about Lent because you share, because you give. Don't tell people what you're going to give up, especially if it's kind of these first world luxuries that are, yeah. I'm going to give up buying, I don't know, expensive shoes or clothes during Lent. Give. Show that you are fasting because you share, because you make someone else's life more beautiful by changing someone else's life. Let that be your communication. It's going to be so much more effective. Yeah, it's more hidden, and you don't get that little rush of gratification when someone likes your photo of Ash Wednesday. But I think it will make you feel much, much better if you are actually using this time of Lent to change the world, and and nobody needs to know except for God and maybe that one person that you helped. And it's more important that that person realizes that someone is helping them, and it doesn't even matter that they know it was you. It's not relevant. It's about the fact that they know that they are loved and that someone sees them. It's like the Secret Santa idea. I love that idea. It's like the present that you give as Secret Santa doesn't need to have your label and, hey, in case you want to thank me, here's my email address. Secret Santa. Do it in secret. Your father sees it. And it will keep your mind on the fruits of Lent. And it keeps you focused on how Lent can help you change the world, because that is what God wants to do through you. And that's much more important than, telling the world and our ambient secular culture that there is still something like Christianity. I mean, the best way to convince people of the importance of faith is by your works, is by how faith helps you to change the lives of others for the better. That is the best way of preaching. Anyway, I'm telling you all this, and at the same time, I'm telling this to myself first and foremost. This is what I want to do. Lent, I don't think, should be about cooked carrots and fish sticks. That's trivial. It's about, can I focus for 40 days on changing the world? And can I be happy? Not about telling myself every day, oh, I give this up. Oh, I give this up. But that I can look at myself in the mirror and I can give myself the thumbs up because, hey, I helped change the world. I made this world a little better just because this Lenten period helps me to focus on what's truly important. And then most of the time, it's not me. And the moment I'm thinking about me during Lent, I'm already doing it wrong. All right, do with it what you want. Please don't feel offended because I'm blaming myself for getting it wrong for most of my life. But it's always time to make some changes.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
I did some reading. I'm so behind. I'm 3 books behind on my reading list. I blame The Pillars of the Earth. Did I review that last week? I think I did. If not, go to my Goodreads page and you'll find my review. I had mixed feelings about the book. However, it was so long that I fell behind on my books. And so I picked another a slightly shorter book for this week. And it's the debut novel by Finn Longman. And the book is called The Butterfly Assassin. I'd never heard of it. And it's thanks to TikTok, actually, that I follow a lot of book talkers, or tokers. How do you call them? Book tokers. That's a real thing. That's a whole subculture on TikTok, and I love it. It's just basically people standing usually in front of their bookshelves, and they tell you what they read and what they thought about it. So there was this young woman who said, I just finished reading The Butterfly Assassin, and it's a young adult novel. It was a nice page turner and tells this story about a girl who is like an assassin by night. That's what the cover says, an assassin by night, and by day just a regular schoolgirl. She's trying to live a normal life, but she's haunted by her life as an assassin in the past. I was like, okay, interesting. But it was mostly because I trusted the TikToker, and her reviews had already pointed me to some really good books. And so I was like, let's give it a try. I found it on Storytel. And so I was listening to the audiobook, and I was pleasantly surprised at first. So the book starts, it's very well written. I like the character work. There were a lot of characters that I think are well-rounded, interesting, lovable, some of them, and despicable, some others. Unfortunately, the main character of the book, Isabel, is a mixed bag. Hard to relate to, because normally in a story, at least the kind of the common stories that we read, the story, a good story is always about the transformation of the main character, right? And it doesn't always have to be transformation in the right way. You can tell a very compelling story about Anakin, starting off as a very nice young boy who always wants to help other people, like Shmi, his mother, says. And then ultimately grows up to be this very obnoxious guy who constantly feels that he's not good enough for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and ultimately falls for the dark side because of the machinations of Palpatine. But in itself, his downfall is a compelling story because he's no longer the boy. So what happened? And the story is about what happened. But you want your main character to end up in a different place than where that main character started. This is where the Butterfly Assassin disappointed me a little bit. I mean, the writing is excellent. I like the premise. So just to summarize it, I'll try to keep this as vague as possible, because I don't want to spoil this. But this is taking place in a world where it's like an alternate history a bit. And there is the world is now, especially England, is ruled by big companies that sell weapons, and this is all part of, like, it's kind of the consequence of a big war that happened. The historical details are a bit vague. Maybe we'll discover more in sequels. But anyway, when the war was over, the people that made the weapons figured that, well, we need to come up with ways to keep selling these weapons. This is way too profitable. And so the whole society started to embrace killing as something that's normal. I mean, in a way, this book is a little bit of a mirror for our times, I think. So violence was made like a normal part of society, and killing other people for whatever reasons was done by these guilds of killers. And so the main protagonist, Isabel, came from a family that did that for a living. And so she's traumatized because she grew up to be a killer. She was abused by her parents in that way. I won't go into detail, but one of the other things I liked about the writing was that you can tell by the way in which the main character acts and the way her feelings are described that she is severely traumatized. But it's never on the nose, you know. You can tell when you're reading. You don't even know her entire backstory, but I could already tell in the first half of the book, like, oh, this girl has gone through some very serious issues, and then later on you just start to discover what she went through and what her parents did to her, and you're like, and now I see why she's behaving this way. However, the big issue that I have with this book is that ultimately the character seems to go through a transformation, and you become hopeful, and you're like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder where this is going to end. Only to conclude, and I'll try to keep this as vague as possible, at the end of the book, she's back where she started. She has learned nothing. She's just picking up where we found her. And it's like, what? How can you write a story where nothing happens? Well, stuff happens, but the main character doesn't really change. It's very I don't know. I at the end of this book, I was like, what was the point of this whole story? So there were some other characters that I felt were very promising and interesting, and at the end of the book, they don't matter. They disappear. It was like there's a lot in this story that puzzles me, and maybe again, it's a debut novel, and there are going to be sequels. So maybe this will ultimately evolve into something a bit more satisfying to read. But this first book, I felt like it's a missed opportunity. There were some good elements. It's very well written. It was a nice page turner. It was a joy to read. But and until the very last page, I was like, maybe I'm still waiting for this one reward for working my way through this story to see that it was not for naught. The main character, and so I, as a reader, I empathize, of course, with the main character. I have gone through some transformation. I've gotten some insight. Things have changed for the better, and it doesn't happen in this book. On the contrary, yep, not exactly what I expected. However, still have to say there were many good things. So if I would have to rate this book, I will still give it 4 stars out of 5. But I hope the sequel will be a little bit more interesting, especially when it comes to like the ethics side of this strange society in which our main protagonist lives and tries to claim back her life. Didn't really happen in this book. All right, maybe I've already spoiled too much. I apologize. Okay, we're in the kitchen and we need to talk about carrots. I have a love-hate relationship with carrots, where you have to scratch the word love. I really have never understood why anyone but Bugs Bunny would eat carrots. Because carrots are for Bugs Bunny. And you're like, I like it. But why would people eat carrots? Okay, this is probably, it's all part of the way in which I got acquainted with carrots. Some people say, well, there are just acquired tastes in the world, like coffee. Not everybody likes coffee. As a child, I hated coffee. I was like, how can you drink coffee? It's, ugh. Tea was tolerable, although we often had to drink like super piping hot tea because we were late for school, and then we would have these big tea mugs, and it would be also like very dark black tea. So I associate tea with my tongue being completely insensitive for days. But it was better than coffee. Coffee was like, I cannot believe that people drink. This was before I went to Rome, of course, later in life. I never really became a coffee aficionado until I went to Rome and like, okay, now this is coffee. This is coffee. And it's unfortunate that if I'm not in Rome, coffee will always be something that I drink mostly because of its effects. But some people will never get used to it. The same thing with alcohol, like beer. I remember the first time that I had a beer as a student, I was like, why would people drink this? This is so awful. It's really not good. I mean, there are so many other things that you can drink. Why would people voluntarily drink beer? So, acquired taste. For me, carrots, same story. Like, the carrots, the Lenten method, where they're all mashed. They're cooked, overcooked, and then mashed with potatoes. Bland taste, like the combination. The carrots are a little bit sweeter, and but it like the way it feels is like baby food, like warmed up baby food. It's like, why would you eat it like that? The alternative, of course, is to eat carrot like Bugs Bunny. So again, one of the things that we used to do in our family was, instead of being served like nuts or potato chips, we would get healthy snacks, which would basically be a plate with crudités, like cut up pieces of cucumber. Okay, that's okay. Cucumbers don't have any taste, so that works. As long as you've got a good dipping sauce, it's tolerable. But then you go to the next level where it's celery, raw celery. You needed a lot more dipping sauce to make that tolerable, because celery itself is a very strong taste. Plus, it's got all these little wires inside of them. It's not meant to be a snack. Anyway, and then bell peppers, like red bell peppers, cut into pieces, and that would also be the snack. And then the worst of the worst of the worst, raw carrot, just plain raw carrot in pieces. And then no matter how much you dip that into the dipping sauce, you would still, like the dipping sauce would first be the first thing you tasted, but then the carrot, you still have to chew it, and it then releases all that awful carrot taste. And I just don't have the ears for that. I was like, okay, Bugs Bunny, that's okay. It's a rabbit. Like, they're genetically wired to like this stuff. But why am I eating this? There's nothing good about carrots. So that's the second form in which I didn't like carrots. And then the third form was actually grated carrots. So use a grater, and then you would have this carrot salad, and it would have vinegar. So this was carrots, raw carrots, grated carrots, and then the dressing was vinegar, maybe some oil, but probably just vinegar. And of course, vinegar is very sour. It's like, no, I'm eating, it still tastes like carrot, and the vinegar is just numbing my tongue. So I taste less carrot, but I know it's just because it's like drenched in vinegar. And so I was like, oh. Later, when I'm a big boy and I can cook myself, I will stop eating carrots, and I will just move on to all the other great things that God gave us to eat. I will not ever miss carrots. However, sometimes you cannot avoid it. And that happened to me last week when I went to get my Too Good To Go box from the local little supermarket here. And there we see the first thing that was on top of all the other vegetables was this huge bag full of carrots. But they even had the green leaves on, still attached to the carrots for some reason. And it was like a kilogram of carrots. And I'm looking at that and saying, oh no, what am I going to do? I cannot throw this away. I'm not, I mean, it's healthy, but how can I, what am I going to do? I don't like carrots. And it's so much. Well, this is where I was saved by the Korean cuisine. I've raved about Korean recipes in the past. If you've watched my live streams on Wednesdays, I've shown you how I can, how with a Korean recipe you can even turn spinach, which also never been a favorite of mine. I can make delicious Korean spinach, which I'm actually totally addicted to. I have always a box of Korean spinach salad in the fridge, and I was like, the Koreans know how to handle difficult vegetables. They must have a solution for carrots. And so I'm Googling Korean recipes for carrots. And lo and behold, there is a way. There is a solution. And it's actually very simple. And it is, well, I wouldn't say it's my favorite recipe, but it makes it more than tolerable. Let's put it that way. So here's what I did. Officially, it's based on grated raw carrots. I don't like graters because I always lose fingers when I'm using a grater. So instead, I'm using my small KitchenAid food chopper, my little, chops everything. So I put some of these carrots, like 4 or 5 carrots in there. They're tiny, Bugs Bunny type of carrots. Cut them into small pieces of a couple of inches per piece or centimeters. And then I just chop it up. So you get this kind of almost like carrot rice. It's these little, how you say that, granulate structure carrots. And then it's very simple. You add Korean soy sauce, number 1. I always just try out I don't know the quantities, but a couple of tablespoons of Korean soy sauce. Then, what was it? Yes, a little bit of rice vinegar, and which is also a bit the same idea of the carrot salad with vinegar, but rice vinegar is very mild. It doesn't have that kick of regular vinegar. So a bit of rice vinegar, not too much. And then a teaspoon or more of honey. And that proved to be the secret ingredient. The honey gives it a little bit of like extra sweetness, but in combination with the saltiness and the umami flavor of the Korean soy sauce. And maybe there were some other ingredients I forgot. You could probably also mix in some crushed sesame seeds. I think I actually added a little bit of sesame oil. You mix it, and it's actually quite nice. It's okay. It works. I don't know why. It's not my favorite recipe, but I can finish those carrots. In fact, I've already eaten it twice this week, which is more carrots than I've eaten for the last 5 years. So something is working there. So thank you. Thank you, people of Korea, for giving me a way out whenever I'm confronted involuntarily with a bunch of carrots in my life. I really appreciate it.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Let's plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
Ooh, I was hoping for that one more thing in the beginning of this year, especially the announcement of if there's one time that Tim Cook can use one more thing, it would be while introducing his AR VR goggles, because this is something that Apple has been working on for years now, and it's almost there, and it was supposed to be presented actually in the weeks to come, and unfortunately, and maybe it's fortunately, Apple has figured out that the software and the hardware was not entirely there yet. There were still some problems. And so they've now postponed the presentation, according to rumors, of course, to WWDC, so the Worldwide Developers Conference that Apple organizes in June every year. So it's going to be a summer introduction, early summer introduction of this new device that maybe not this particular version of it, but the technology as such could be so impactful that it may actually change the whole mobile industry. We know that this first pair of VR AR goggles is going to be very expensive, and it's going to be still big and bulky because it's very difficult to size it down to a regular pair of glasses. That's just a matter of time. I'm convinced that they will figure that out over time. It's just that it's still not possible. Also, it's not standalone. You will have to carry like a bit of a brick on your waist. So it's going to have like a wired connection to your glasses. All that doesn't sound too appealing to me. But this is first gen. Remember the first iPhone that came out? There were no apps. Only the built-in apps, but all the other stuff, and Steve Jobs even promoted that as a feature and not as a shortcoming, was, but you can just turn every website into an online app, and it's, that was very short-lived. But if you look at how far the same device has come over the years and what an iPhone can do today compared to that very first version, that's, I think, how Apple looks at the long-term strategy when it comes to this new technology, which is not entirely new, but I think that Apple is probably going to do it in a way that is superior to everything else we've seen. And so I'm glad, in a way, that they want this to be perfect, or as close to perfect as possible, before they present it to the general public. And at the same time, I'm a little bit disappointed because I just want to see what they've been working on for so many years. You know that I love this technology. I'm not sure if I will be able to afford it, but I am super interested in where this is going. And I think as soon as this is in developers' hands, we will see an explosion of creativity. It always works like this. Like with the watch, the Apple Watch, when it came out, everybody's like, okay, Apple is also going to do a watch. Well, this is never going to fly. All these WebOS, or what was it, the Android-based watches, they really never took off. They had very lousy battery life, and they were slow. And like, why would I change my regular watch for something as clunky as an electronic watch? And especially, how can you sell a watch like that for, what was it, $300 at the beginning? Nowadays, they're selling watches that cost like almost $1,000 for just a watch that in a year or 2 years from now, everybody's going to say, oh, that's still that's the original Ultra. Wow, that's vintage. Does it still work for you? Yeah, it doesn't get updates anymore, but this is what Apple does. So, but they, as soon as they came out with this watch and kept improving it over time, I'm now wearing the Apple Watch 4. I've been using this thing for 2 weeks now, 2.5 weeks. And it's just so groundbreaking, and there's so many innovations, and it's just the perfect complement to the iPhone. And also the combination of these two is just so good, so well done. And the iPhone, one of our patrons gifted me his old iPhone 10. And for me, that was a huge upgrade because I've only had an iPhone 6, which was secondhand as well. So, but this particular phone runs the latest version of the operating system. It's got a beautiful OLED screen. I've now finally figured out how to do all the widgets on every page. And so it's so cool. I use this all the time. The only thing that maybe a bit of a downgrade when it comes to compared to my old Android phone is that this is a much smaller phone, so the battery is depleted at the end of the day. Whereas my previous phone, I could charge it every 2 or 3 days. That's how long. But it was a huge phone. The phone was just as big as the iPhone 14 Max. So it's a very heavy phone. What I love about this one is how small it is. I can use it in one hand. And it's lightweight, and it's just a gorgeous little thing. But the combination with the Apple Watch, I use it a lot for monitoring my sleep lately, as well as my runs and everything. And so it's all in Apple Health, and I get this wonderful collection of data, and I can see the trends over time. And I can already tell that this combination of the watch and the phone has made a major has had a major impact on my overall energy levels. I've shared this before. I've been suffering. I had a lot of problems with chronic fatigue, where I would just collapse, because I wasn't really monitoring how much I slept and the quality of my sleep and all that. Since I've started to use this to monitor my sleep, my physical exercise, and also used it to kind of balance out my days, I'm feeling already a ton better. And it's just after 3 weeks of use. So very, very impressive. And I think with when they first launched the watch, it didn't have all that functionality, but they've improved it over the years. And I think the same is going to happen with those goggles. So I'm excited about that. Finally, I've also thought of maybe upgrading my graphics card in my PC because I wanted to play the Harry Potter game, which is beautiful and wonderful, but for some reason on my old PC, the faces looked like balloons with like black dots in where the eyes should be. It looked so like a PlayStation 1. I'm like, oh my gosh, my computer's way too old to run this game. And it's funny because in the cutscenes, when you first start to play, it looked fantastic. And it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that my old computer can do this. And then I started to play the actual game, and it was so awful. And it looked so subpar. And so I've been asking my friends on Discord, what should I get? And then I get all these tips. Well, maybe you should get this or this card. But it all starts like $500, $600 for just a graphics card. And not only do I have to replace the graphics card, but also my power brick. That is currently I have like a 500 watt power brick, which at the time was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all this power? Turns out now I have to have to replace the power brick with a thing that is like twice the wattage, like 1,000 watts. Like the graphics card alone will probably just use up like 100 watts of energy. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but a ton of energy. All for one game. That felt a little bit like strange. And so I was talking to Pedro, who is one of our Discord members. He started off as a seminarian, and now he's a transitional deacon. He will be ordained a priest in a couple of months from now. And he had bought, instead of upgrading his computer, he had bought a Steam Deck, which is made by Valve. And it looks a bit like the Nintendo Switch. It's a portable device. It runs on Linux, and actually, it does run games like Hogwarts Legacy and Red Dead Redemption and a lot of games like Valheim, obviously. And I'm thinking, you know what? Instead of paying hundreds and hundreds of euros on replacing just a graphics card and then a power brick in my computer, maybe I'll just get a Steam Deck. So I ordered one. And they're actually quite affordable for something that runs like the latest games. Pedro helped me also to, gave me a lot of great advice on which configuration and stuff. I got myself a little, just amazing. The Steam Deck itself comes with not much memory, but I bought a memory chip, or what is it called, an SD card, like a micro SD card. And it has half a terabyte, like 512 gigs. And it cost $30. And it's super tiny. It's half a terabyte of data. I mean, it's just insane how cheap this stuff has become. And apparently that works just as well as internal memory, so you can run games off of it. So anyway, looking forward to trying that out next week. But then I was like, okay, so what's wrong with these graphics? I did a bit of research on the forums, and it turns out it's a bug. It's a bug. I had to change a few initiation files and had to add some code. Of course, I don't understand what I'm doing, but I'm just reading like, this will solve your problem. So I add the code, save the file, and boom, the game looks gorgeous. Turns out that I went through all of that stuff because of a stupid bug, which they will probably fix in the next update. Anyway, glad I've solved it. and I'm also actually happy that I don't have to buy upgrades for my old PC anymore. It kind of feels like if you start upgrading one thing, then, maybe I should also upgrade this and also upgrade that. And you end up basically spending the money that you would spend on a new computer. So glad I don't have to do all that. Time to wrap things up. Thank you so much for your patience to make it all the way to the end of this podcast. 10 points for Gryffindor or Hufflepuff or Slytherin or whatever, Ravenclaw. I don't know what school you were, what house you are sorted in, but I appreciate your patience. I want to end with a thought, and this time it's by Saint Robert Bellarmine. How do you pronounce that last name? I don't know. Saint Robert, and he says, "Charity is that with which no man is lost, and without which no man is saved." Man/woman/ Borg/ Vulcan/ whatever. So charity is that with which no man is lost. That's true. And without which no man is saved. Also true. Now, go and make it so. Have a great start of Lent. And as always, you know how to reach me. And if you're one of my patrons, thanks so much for your support. And I will see you in the discussion section about this podcast on our Discord server. Patreon.com/Father Roderick. Talk to you next week.